Listen to me very carefully. Everything they told you is a lie. It's all part of the Norman conspiracy. I will show you the true first king of England, but to do so, I must break that most sacred rule of English history. We're going back before 1066. I'm guessing if you're from England, you probably know that pre-Norman history is actually every bit as cool as the rest of it. Maybe not, I don't know what they're teaching you, you've got 1,000 years to cover anyway, but it is! Like today we think of England as belonging to the Western European family of countries, but once upon a time it was practically Scandinavia. I'll spare you the details, but there were Romans in Britannia, then Anglo-Saxons in Angloland, they became Christian, then a whole bunch of Vikings came ashore and went, yeah, we're going to settle down and become entangled in your culture and participate in the Northern European trade network, haha! Thus establishing the Danelaw, which had asserted itself over all of England, but for Alfred the Great and his Wessex. Quite frankly, he deserves his own episode, all in due time. The Vikings were kind enough to break up the Heptarchy, so where England used to be ruled by Kent, Mercia, East Anglia, Northumbria, Essex, Wessex, and Sussex, Anglo-Saxons were so good at naming things. Now it was just Wessex and an itty-bitty little piece of York still ruled by the Vikings. For a while, though, it looked like Proto-England was more likely to split up than to unify. Alfred's son Edward had 2 sons, and it looked like he had opened up the throne of Mercia to Aethelstan while giving Wessex to Aelfwerd, which of course was bound to go swimmingly. Not to mention he was on his 3rd wife by this point, who was more inclined to support her own children as mothers are wont to do, just a recipe for disaster. And can we take a moment to appreciate just how many elves were in pre-England? Seriously, Edward deposed Aelfwine so his wife Aelfled's son Aelfwerd could have a separate kingdom from Aethelstan. No wonder everybody starts with William. Conveniently for us all, Aelfwerd died about 2 weeks after Edward. Aethelstan was still only king of Mercia for a little bit, but the Wessexans came around eventually, possibly on the condition that he didn't get married or have kids, so he got himself a fancy crown instead of the helmet the kings used to wear, which was so last century. Opposition continued for a little while, but yeah, it's fine. Edwin drowned eventually. And he did some pretty noteworthy things with most of England under his belt. Like any noteworthy leader, he centralized the government, not because a government focused on an individual always does good things, but because it's not as interesting to talk about the time local lords were happy with the status quo and continued tending to their fiefdoms. Not that his vassals weren't also getting more powerful. With the rapid expansion of the kingdom, the Ealdormen went from managing a single shire to in some cases ruling over what used to be an entire kingdom unto itself, which is why one of them, who was also called Aethelstan because it was such a popular name, was called Half-King and adopted a son who would later become Edgar the Peaceable, not that he lived to see the coronation. By the way, his wife was named Aelfwine, his children Aethelwig, Aethelsig, Aethelwyn, Aethelwald, and Aelfwald. Seriously. To keep things from getting too out of hand, he wrote a common law in Old English vernacular, largely inspired by Charlemagne and his grandfather's Doom Book. This was nice because it meant that people could actually read it, though on the other hand, he wrote a law so petty it made Javert look like Jesus. Not even kidding, if you stole 8 pence worth of property and you were old enough to order off the adult menu, it was lights out for you, pal. He tried a whole bunch of things to fix burglary, never seemed to work out, though he eventually raised the death penalty age to 15 and lumped everyone into groups of 10 and made them accountable for each other. Speaking of, accountability and Jesus and whatnot, he made a close connection to the church, who is pretty cool with the whole taking back land from the pagans thing. Just because I love the naming conventions of the time so much, I'll mention that he got to appoint various bishops, so he made his personal priest Aelfia the Bishop of Wells, and appointed a man named Bjornstan as the Bishop of Winchester, but he died, so he appointed a new priest, also named Aelfia. And he also collected a whole bunch of religious relics that he gave out as wedding presents when he married his relatives to various people on the continent. Like one time his cousin stopped by and was like, hey, you got any sisters left? The Duke of the Franks wants one. And Aethelstan was like, here you go. And here's a crown of solid gold, and Constantine's sword, and Charlemagne's lance, and a piece of the crown of thorns. Oh, here, let me give you something to carry that in. Monarchs, of course, are known for their complicated marriage networks, but Aethelstan was leagues ahead of the game. He was shipping out sisters to Francia, the Holy Roman Empire. He had all the bases covered, including, that's right, York. See, shortly after becoming king, he married his sister to the King of York, Cedric, who had already gotten kicked out of Dublin, and promised he wouldn't kick him out of England because that's too much, man. Aw, look at that, we managed to get Ireland in the episode. Hello, Ireland! Soon Cedric died, and Aethelstan took the chance to invade. It was a pretty safe bet, considering the next in line, Guthfrith, had to sail all the way from Dublin, and England was finally a thing. Hooray! Not wanting to gather any moss, Aethelstan set out to Scotland a few years later once his biggest contenders were all dead. He rode off into the fog of history, but when he came back, he had Constantine II with him swearing fealty. But back in Dublin, Olaf Guthfrithson, son of Guthfrith, was a little peeved about being left out of the picture, just like Constantine was a bit peeved at having to play second fiddle to Aethelstan. So in autumn of 937, in what can only be described as a fantasy writer's wet dream, a combined force of Gaels, Norsemen, Scots, and Britons marched south to challenge the English, who miraculously pulled through, meaning that England would continue to be a thing, for another couple years anyway, until the Vikings took back York after Aethelstan died. So yeah, you can debate whether or not he was really King of England, because technically Wessex had gained dominion with Alfred, and technically Edred had the last laugh with York, and technically England got taken over by some Danish Canute, and technically Williams was the last successful conquering, but my end card's running out of time, so like if you liked it, subscribe if you subscribe to my worldview, and have a nice day.